First of all, I would like to mention something. The life expectancy of a regular individual here in Turkey is like 74 years. And now, we surpass the relations of both countries beyond a lifespan of an individual. So that's a good thing. I have checked the time difference between Indonesia and Turkey. It's 4 hours. On the other hand, flight is 11 hours. That's the average. But that inspired me on something. If you go to the United States from Istanbul to New York directly, it's also 11 hours. Almost. On the other hand, we have an increased interaction with the United States. On the other hand, Turkish-Indonesia relations need a further step, maybe to consolidate it much more effectively, to have concrete outputs. I think that's my idea. In this sense, I would like to welcome you to understand exactly the scope and base of these relations, the further prospects. On the other hand, maybe the concrete steps should be taken. Dr. Dina Prapto Raharja, Associate Professor of International Relations and Executive Director and Co-founder of Synergy Policies, and also a Senior Policy Advisor.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I thank SETA and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Indonesia, as well as the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Turkey for hosting this very important gathering. I'm a political economist, and aside from being an academic, I also established a think tank called Synergy Policies, linking macro approach to diplomacy with sectoral policies, which can be very challenging. You may negotiate on so many things, but if it doesn't trickle down to what is beneficial for the people, then what's the point, right? And aside from that, also among sectoral policies, stakeholders, they may also have different perspectives, different approach in understanding how things should be done. So if you're interested to see the publications from Synergy Policies, you can go to our website. And there's also a study actually that I wrote for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to set the tone and to also draw on what the stakeholders' perception, both from Indonesia's side and Turkey's side, on the way forward for the relationship. So along the way, I may touch base on that a little bit. I truly believe that our task as civil society and academia is to oversee and to work with various stakeholders so that our governments can produce policies that serve the most people. Now, I traveled to Europe 2 weeks ago. I went to Brussels, I went to Berlin, spoke to European Union and all the authorities in there. And I also came back from a Turkey organized program in Bodrum, EDAM and Center for European Reform. So the key questions that people have been asking is that how to navigate the turbulence of geopolitics. So I would like to start by saying that if you want to be strategic in a relationship, you have to start from whatever it is that you are, but you don't need to always think that we have to start with common interest. There's one thing as common interest, the other thing is joint interest. Joint interest you can develop together based on agreements for the right reasons, and you technically try to help each other, support each other in reaching the goals that may be useful not just for your region, but also for the entire mission in the diplomacy. And communication is really key to deepen trust. So the world is technically under pressure, and a few of things I would like to highlight to start off the conversation, which is that the liberal world order is no longer dependable, right? Some of these we have seen happening. Number one, the persistence of aggression and the use of violence to the point of genocide, and also impunity to rampant violence and violations of humanity. Number two, I would like to highlight that countries tend to look very much inward looking, promising things to their people, while at the same time being unrealistic to how to achieve it. Number 3, there's a very serious tendency of harboring suspicion towards other countries. For the sake of what? Harnessing power, influence, global influence, projecting that your country is the most important one in the order. Number 4, I noticed that more and more state-centric approach is very, very apparent, despite the fact that for the last few decades, we actually have worked on liberalist cooperation, liberal order cooperation. We have developed a system of interdependence. We have engaged non-state actors. All of that crumbles because the approach becomes very much state-centric. The 5th point is that unipolar world is now seen as a norm to hold on to. So that's what I see happening in Europe, people truly believe that there's a problem, but at the same time, they still see that the existing order is, worth keeping. So let's look at the question in time of uncertainty. What should we prioritize in short term so that in the medium term and in the longer term, we can find some kind of settlement or let's say equilibrium? Let's look into the bilateral relations between Indonesia and Turkey. Dr. Murad mentioned a very pertinent point, 75 years of relationship. We have always been good friends. Looking back, there's no spot or blotch in the relationship. Technically, everything was good, but we have to admit limited areas have been explored for cooperation. Platforms are plenty, but we have to be also honest that platforms alone will not be enough in time of uncertainty. We need to identify some kind of common denominator among us, and again, joint agreement of what we see as our strength and how we work on the challenges so that we can bridge the gap. So let's see from what we have. If you look at the geographical aspect of us, topographically speaking, we are different, right? Indonesia is an archipelago with volcanic everywhere. And Turkey is more of a continental and mountainous area to most parts of Turkey. Indonesia is very fast, 3 time zones, GMT +7, 8, and 9. So Indonesia from east to west is very much comparable to the distance from London to Kabul. So the width of Europe or even the breadth of Russia. So along with all the oceans, Indonesia is actually an immense country, spanning between the Indian and Pacific Oceans. And you take from west to east, flying time of at least 7 hours. And there's no flight that's actually direct from one place to another. So that covers the distance between Amsterdam and New York. So I'm saying this not to say that, it's distance is very important to understand our perspective of how diverse and how complex sometimes what we have to take care. And then the other important aspect we need to consider is the sea lanes of communication. I don't bring the picture of Turkey's sea lanes of communications, but you're familiar with your own picture that Turkey is very critical in the Black Sea littoral state. You connect different regions through your area in the Black Sea. And therefore, you have a responsibility to maintain geostrategic leverage as well as security responsibility in that lane. Indonesia, if you look at this map, is covering the most vital maritime corridors in global trade. So the distance is much huge, and it's actually in the heart of Indo-Pacific narrative that the United States is creating to ensure its relevance in today's global order. So we don't look at this simply for its picture or two-dimensional character, right? But you actually see this as money, commodities, flowing, and also mobility of people. So if we want to see the underlying point of these pictures, sea lanes of communication in our countries by nature will put our countries be always interested in maintaining peace and stability in the area, full stop, right? That's like non-negotiable. And by nature, Indonesian people and Turkey people will be open-minded people who will be inclusive in cooperation. And our strength, I go to different parts of Turkey in the past few days, I see that most people in Turkey is almost similar like Indonesian. We are open-minded and we are great in communication. And in various ways, our leaders generate trust from other countries through diplomacy. Because of what? One of the feature is its, location, geographic importance, right? So we have seen numerous cases. Turkey basically bridge gaps of trust between regions, Israel, Palestine, Russia, Ukraine. Indonesia also serve very important role in bridging trust among ASEAN member states, whom we can always discuss about it later. It's not necessarily in always good terms with each other, especially back in the 60s and 70s, among the emerging economies and the North, the G20, APEC on infrastructure, small Pacific islands. So how do we make sure that we tap the most of our strength? I see gaps in current context. Number one, both our countries are overstretched in terms of resources. Resources are limiting, but problems are mounting. For Turkey, your people and your government, your eyes remains to the Europe. That's my conclusion. Talking to various people, your eyes remains to Europe and to transatlantic cooperation. I understand it's very important for Turkey to remain connected to transatlantic, but honestly speaking, the Europeans is not looking at you in the eye. In terms of willingness to discuss about EU membership, Turkey membership in EU, for instance, well, it's very much going to be still a long time. That's my conclusion after talking to them. And then EU security definitely is no longer a priority for the United States. And can the European Union deal with it? Well, they are still in the very tough process internally to digest what then to do if the US is already taking a different route. Second pressure, financial pressure, tariff, tax, savings, energy cost. In both our countries, we are experiencing the pressure. But Turkey is much more sensitive to energy pressure because you're a larger net importer compared to Indonesia, net importer of energy. And but at the same time, maybe this is informative to you too, that Indonesia is having energy subsidy policy. So any shift in energy supply also affects the state budget ability. And Indonesia has been trying to create more reserve for oil and gas. The challenge is that it has been estimated maybe in the next 20 years, the availability ratio is only 60% for oil and gas generated from our own territory. The fourth challenge, environmental degradation. If people continue industrialize, you can imagine it's going to be burning the carbon. So environmental degradation is very much a serious issue that both of us have to deal with. Trade in both countries are weakening. Turkey, traditional export sector is textile, apparel, shipbuilding, and wheat, have been weakened, if I'm not mistaken, under the pressure of an uncompetitive lira. And but you have defense industry to help boost it up. Now, the case of, so in conclusion, what would I say as needs to be done? In the short run, I truly believe that medium run, not short run, medium run, let's say within 5 years, what can be done and should be more evident as an output. Number one, let's work together on bringing out narrative of being middle power. Number one, I suggest the issue of energy as right, energy as a right for people. Energy needs inclusive distribution. Energy needs to help redesign the economy and society, needs to be in the forefront because energy is very key for development. So let's not just talk very generic about middle power term, but focus on funding. Turkey's share of electricity generation mix is now 42%. The picture here is just one of the pictures that Turkey, with its renewable energy zone, has been trying to fulfill more renewable energy mix. But the European Union still see this as below the average, right, of renewable energy generation compared to European countries. Now, you have to understand also that in Indonesia, investment for renewable energy is growing. But we are working very closely also with partner countries that can provide cheaper technologies for green technology. Transition and phasing out from brown and black energy to green is very critical. And you have to understand, many countries, especially European Union, only focus at the end. The trade of carbon, the trade of goods, carbon capture, that's at the downstream aspect of renewable energy transition. You have to understand that to start investment in renewable energy mix is what's very key. And many countries suffer because the United States pull out of this picture, and the European Union suffer because of the NATO requirement, for instance. They change the budget sector. Number two, in the middle run, I think let's focus also on manufacturing sector. Going back on point one, transfer of technology is very key. And to do so, I think you have to change the mindset on global supply chain, because not all countries are endowed with natural resources. And just because a country like Indonesia is endowed with natural resources, then other countries can just tap in and then, complain to us that export limitations should not be done because it's against the law. At the end of the day, we have to think about a new model for industrialization and for manufacturing cooperation. Number three, it's very pertinent Indonesia and Turkey work on the financial sector, because if we want to work on more trading, more production, licensing, payment-related structure needs to be improved, and also custom relationship. Number four, defense industry cooperation, technology sharing, you mentioned over and over. I think I'm not going to discuss on that further, but I guess the challenge is that do not think that all of this will go smoothly, because the US is very volatile. You never know what the US is going to respond next week or a year from now. So for that, we shouldn't be complacent. We should prepare for that. Last, commitment to peace and its narrative in the multipolar world. It's not an easy job to say, what does the world look like if it's beyond 5 in the UN. In the short run, so within the next 3 years, we need more people-to-people understanding. Education, journalism is a very important for our relationship. Information is key to understanding. Track 1.5, track 2 dialogue like this is very important to understand how our people think and react. Again, it's not enough to just discuss about macro diplomacy issues. You need to imagine how that would be understood by people and how they run with it. In ASEAN, I suggest the involvement of or engaging Turkey in ICHAR, ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights, ACWC on Commission of Women and Children, and also track 2, because until you have the full understanding of how ASEAN works, it's probably going to be very challenging for you to also engage at the track 1 level. So at least these are 2 of my suggestions. We can always discuss later. Thank you so much.